You're lucky to have him, they used to say. God, if they only knew what it really felt like, being loved by someone who needed to win every argument like it was a courtroom battle. I wasn't his girlfriend. I was his closing statement. The night Leo humiliated Jack was the beginning of the end. Or maybe it was just when the end finally said hello, cool and inevitable like winter creeping under the door. It had been 3 years, 3 solid years, of building something that looked almost perfect from the outside. Jack was a lawyer, the kind who wore tailored suits even on Sundays and always looked like he had just stepped out of a GQ article titled Power and Precision. He had this calm, composed energy, like nothing could shake him. Like he could see through people the way a surgeon sees through skin, just layers to peel back until the truth sits there, exposed. I used to love that about him. Used to. He said I was smart. Fierce. That he believed in me more than anyone ever had. He paid for law school. Bought me a car. Gave me a key to his house. Told me we were a team. But sometimes it felt like I was a junior partner in a firm where he made all the rules. And then there was Leo. Leo was chaos in jeans and irony. A freelance graphic designer with a knack for bad timing and brilliant sarcasm. He was the kind of guy who wore thrifted leather jackets and made every story sound like a movie scene. I met him in college, long before Jack. We were never together, not like that. But he was the one who held me when I cried over Alex, the musician who turned heartbreak into an art form and left me in pieces. Leo saw me when I didn't even know who I was. He didn't just protect me, he reminded me I had claws. Jack hated him. Of course he did. He said Leo was a leech. A self-important mess pretending to be an artist while barely scraping by. Maybe he was right. But Leo was mine. My past. My person. So when Jack invited him to the dinner party, the one he threw to celebrate winning the biggest case of his career, I knew he was trying. That meant something. For a while, it even felt okay. Jack looked relaxed for once. The wine flowed, laughter danced between the candlelight. But then Leo got that look in his eyes. The one that meant trouble was coming. He started talking about creatives versus suits, sipping Jack's expensive wine like it was water, throwing little barbs wrapped in poetry. I could feel the tension rising like static. Jack just sat there, still and sharp like a knife waiting to be used. Leo leaned into the performance, looking right at him, voice dripping with charm that barely hid the blade beneath. She could do way better than you, Leo said. And, just like that, everything froze. I wanted to disappear. Crawl under the table. Unhear what had just been said. But Jack didn't flinch. He put his fork down, folded his hands, and went full prosecutor mode. Calm. Cold. Precise. The way he tore into Leo was surgical. He didn't yell. He didn't raise his voice. He just dissected him. Every line, every choice, every inch of his so-called artistic life laid out and methodically dismantled like a closing argument he'd been rehearsing for months. The car. The money. The house. Even my law school tuition. Piece by piece, Jack exposed Leo as a drain, a parasite feeding off what he built. And I sat there, burning. Not with embarrassment. Not with shame. But with anger. Because it wasn't just Leo he was putting on trial, it was me. Every dollar he'd spent on me, every gesture of support, he turned into an exhibit in a courtroom where love was a transaction. Where loyalty was measured in receipts. He finished his speech. The room was silent. And then I said it. Apologize to him. Right now. Or we're done. I wasn't bluffing. I was shaking. I knew it was the wrong thing to say the second the words left my mouth, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed him to see what he'd just done. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just smiled. Not kindly. Not sadly. Just like something had snapped. He stood up, walked to the kitchen, and left me sitting there alone in a room full of people who suddenly didn't know where to look. That was 2 weeks ago. Leo said I made the right call. That Jack was toxic. Controlling. A man who used money like shackles. So I moved in with Leo. And I waited. I waited for Jack to call. To knock on the door. To say he was sorry and that he didn't mean it. That he'd fight for me. But the call never came. The silence was unbearable. And I was about to learn that when Jack said nothing, it wasn't indifference, it was the sound of a man erasing you from his life. At first, I thought silence was a pause, a breath, a space for someone to think before they forgive you. But Jack's silence was something else entirely. It wasn't a pause. It was a full stop. The night I moved in with Leo, I told myself it was temporary. A heat-of-the-moment decision. I told myself Jack would come around, because how could he not? We'd built a life together. 3 years of shared groceries, pillow talk, and plans for a wedding that never quite made it to paper. Sure, the fight was ugly. The dinner party was a disaster. But love, real love, could survive one explosion, couldn't it? Apparently not. He didn't call. He didn't text. He didn't show up. Not even a sarcastic message. Not even a final insult. Just nothing. Leo tried to play it cool. He bought flowers from the corner bodega, poured me wine in chipped mugs, said things like, "You're free now. You don't need him." But I wasn't free. I was floating, weightless, anchorless, and slowly realizing I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. By day 3, my phone was a graveyard of unanswered calls and unread messages, all from me. By day 5, I stopped trying. And by day 10, the quiet had curled around me like smoke, thick and suffocating. The apartment was a joke. Leo's apartment, I mean. A tiny walk-up with flickering lights and a futon that smelled like fear and regret. Dishes piled up. The bathroom door didn't lock. Every window rattled when the wind blew, and I couldn't sleep. I tried to tell myself I was okay. That I could start over. I had law school, my internship at Jack's firm coming up. I had a future. But when I finally worked up the nerve to go back to the house, to our house, it hit me. My key didn't work. I stared at the door like a stranger. Something inside me broke. I rang the bell. When Jack answered, the chain was still on. His face was calm. Too calm. "Jack, we need to talk," I said, hating how my voice cracked. "No, Anna," he replied, flat as stone. "We don't." I blinked. "You can't just throw away 3 years over one fight." "It wasn't a fight," he said. "It was a moment of truth." The next few minutes were a blur of devastation. He told me, without blinking, that the tuition fund was gone. That the internship was gone. That we were gone. My stomach dropped. My knees buckled. I felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under me, and I was falling fast. "You can't do this," I whispered. "I already have," he said. "Actions have consequences." That line echoed in my head for days. Leo didn't get it. He called Jack a tyrant, a manipulative control freak. But he didn't understand what I had lost. Because it wasn't just the money, or the internship, or even the house. It was the version of myself I'd built with Jack. The future I thought was real. The woman I thought I was becoming. That woman had vanished. And all I had left was the sharp, metallic taste of regret in my mouth and the cold reality of living with someone who was starting to feel more like a mistake than a savior. Leo was changing too. He was restless, moody. He said I wasn't fun anymore. That I was bringing the vibe down. He started disappearing for hours, sometimes whole nights. He'd come back smelling like bars and cheap perfume, brushing off questions with smug little grins. And every time I looked at him, I saw what Jack had seen that night. The arrogance. The freeloading. The empty charm. I started asking myself a dangerous question. Did I ever really love Leo? Or was I just using him to escape Jack's shadow? I didn't know the answer. Not yet. But I knew something else. I had burned down my life for a man who couldn't even pick up his own laundry. The first eviction notice came a week later. Leo laughed it off. Said it was a mistake. That he'd handle it. But I knew. I knew the spiral had started. And I was trapped inside it, watching everything fall. They don't tell you what happens after you burn your bridges. Everyone talks about the fire, how bold it is, how brave. But no one talks about the silence that follows, when you're standing in the smoke, realizing there's no way back. I stopped checking my phone. There were no messages, no calls. Just the same blank screen and a battery that lasted way too long because no one needed me anymore. And the worst part? I couldn't even blame them. Jack had vanished from my life like a magician. Clean cut. No traces. Like he'd trained for it. I guess in some ways he had. Lawyers know how to exit. It's practically a survival skill. But I didn't think he'd erase me so completely. I kept replaying that night on his doorstep. The click of the chain. His face behind it, emotionless, unreadable. The way he said, "You made your choice." Like I was just a case file closed and archived. I wanted to scream at him. Tell him it wasn't that simple. That I didn't choose Leo. I just didn't know how to let go of someone who had always been there. Even when he shouldn't have been. But Jack didn't want explanations. He wanted peace. And he bought it with silence. Meanwhile, Leo's apartment felt smaller by the day. The charm had long since worn off. The record player he used to play old jazz on? Broken. The fridge? Mostly empty. The only consistent thing in the place was the smell, sour and bitter, like spilled beer and lost ambition. I started waking up with this pit in my stomach. Not anxiety. Not fear. Something else, like grief, but alive and squirming. The kind that doesn't let you eat. Or sleep. Or think clearly. Leo was either gone or sulking. He hated that I wasn't grateful. That I wasn't playing the muse he imagined I'd be. He said I was emotionally constipated. That I used to be passionate and spontaneous, and now I was just a walking resume. "Maybe Jack broke you," he said once, lighting a cigarette with this smug half-smile. Maybe he was right. But maybe he was the one who finished the job. I started avoiding him. Pretending to be asleep when he came home. Making up fake study groups just to leave the apartment. I'd go sit in coffee shops with a laptop I couldn't afford and stare at the login page for the law school portal, knowing the balance due was impossible. $50,000. Gone. And with it, my future. Every time I thought about it, my throat would close. That internship at Jack's firm? It was my ticket out. My leverage. My chance to prove I was more than just a paralegal with dreams bigger than her bank account. Now it was gone. And I couldn't tell anyone why. Not my professors. Not my classmates. Not even my parents, who still thought everything was going fine. How do you explain to people that your life imploded because of one dinner party and one terrible sentence? Apologize or we're over. God, I hate those words now. I hear them in my sleep. In the shower. In the silence that fills the space between thoughts. It wasn't even about Leo. Not really. I think part of me just wanted to see if Jack would fight for me. If he'd still choose me, even when I made the wrong call. He didn't. And maybe he shouldn't have. One night, I came home and found Leo sitting on the couch, surrounded by candles and empty wine bottles. He was playing guitar, badly, and singing some song he wrote about the hypocrisy of capitalism, or something equally pretentious. "Sing with me," he said, grinning. "I can't," I muttered, heading straight for the bathroom. "God, you're so uptight now," he called after me. "Jack really did a number on you, huh?" I slammed the door and sat on the edge of the tub, shaking. My reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. Hollowed-out eyes. Skin too pale. Hair dull and tangled. This wasn't me. This was what was left of me. Later that night, I went through a box of old papers I'd shoved under the bed when I moved in. Among the mess, I found a copy of my old admissions essay, the one I'd written to get into law school. It was full of fire. Full of fight. I talked about justice. About resilience. About being the kind of woman who changes lives, not just her own. I didn't recognize her. She was bold. She was idealistic. She wouldn't have begged for scraps from a man who couldn't even pay his rent on time. She wouldn't have thrown away everything for a moment of ego. And she sure as hell wouldn't be living in a shoebox with a failed artist who smelled like weed and resentment. Something snapped that night. Not loudly. Just quietly. Like the last thread giving way. I packed a bag the next morning. Leo didn't notice. He was passed out on the couch, snoring, with a paintbrush still stuck in his hair and ash on his shirt. I stood over him for a long time, thinking I might say something. Anything. But in the end, I just walked out. Not back to Jack. I wasn't that delusional. That door was closed. I just needed to find me again. Or at least the pieces. Because Jack may have been the one to end it. But I was the one who lost myself first. You don't realize you're drowning until you stop struggling. That was the worst part, how easy it was to let go. To let the shame settle in like an old roommate who never plans to leave. After I left Leo's apartment, I checked into a cheap motel with stained carpets and peeling wallpaper. The kind of place where you keep your shoes on, even in bed. It wasn't glamorous, but it was quiet. It was mine. And for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I didn't cry. I'd already done that. At least, I thought I had. Turns out there's a whole new kind of crying you discover when regret stops being a sharp edge and becomes a dull ache that lives in your bones. The kind that creeps up on you while brushing your teeth. Or folding a shirt you haven't worn since you lived in a better life. I spent the first few days staring at the ceiling. No calls. No classes. No plans. I was a dropout now. A half-built thing with nowhere to go. But then something strange happened. I got angry. Not at Jack. Not even at Leo, really. I got angry at me. Angry that I let a man talk me into abandoning someone who had invested in me, believed in me, just because he made me feel special in the middle of a party. Angry that I thought loyalty was optional. That I confused drama with passion. That I mistook Jack's stability for control when it was actually the only real safety I'd ever had. I started making lists. Not because I had a plan, but because I needed to do something. Lists of jobs I could maybe get without finishing school. Lists of scholarship applications. Lists of law firms I might beg to let me intern. I deleted Leo's number. I blocked him on everything. He sent me one final message before I did. Guess you finally figured out you're not special without him. That one stung. Not because it was true, but because a part of me still feared it might be. I never replied. One afternoon, I was in a library, looking for job postings, when I saw a man who looked like Jack from behind, same suit, same posture, same quiet confidence. My heart did a stupid little jump. But when he turned around, it wasn't him. And I realized. I didn't want to see Jack. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because even now, even after everything, I knew what would be in his eyes if he looked at me. Not hatred. Disappointment. And I couldn't bear that. So I got a job at a small legal aid nonprofit. It wasn't prestigious, and the pay barely covered rent. But I was helping people. For real. I started sleeping again. Eating. My voice stopped shaking when I said my name. I was rebuilding. Slowly. Quietly. Brick by brick. One day, I got a letter. Not from Jack. From the firm. The same firm where I was supposed to intern. Someone had found my name in the system and followed up, said they'd heard about personal complications and wanted to know if I was still interested in applying for next year. I stared at that letter for hours. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't ready to walk back into the orbit of Jack's world. But I also wasn't the girl who needed saving anymore. That girl was gone. When I finally wrote back, I kept it short. Thank you for the opportunity. I'd like to be considered again. I've grown since last year. I'm not the same person. I didn't mention Jack. I didn't have to. He knew. Wherever he was, I knew he knew. A few months later, I ran into one of our old friends at a cafe. She told me Jack was doing well. Busy as always. He was dating someone new. A doctor, I think. I nodded and smiled. And I meant it. Because I wasn't looking for a way back anymore. I was looking forward. Yes, I lost him. I lost law school. I lost the life I thought was mine. But I gained something else. Something quieter, but stronger. Clarity. And if I ever build something again, with someone new, or even just with myself, I'll know better than to let a parasite speak louder than my own voice. Because now I know what done really means. It's not slamming doors. It's not ultimatums. It's the silence after. The part where you rebuild in peace.